If you guys would like to see me cover certain stories on my channel, hit the link in the description box below to submit your requests. John Frusciante would be the longest serving guitarist in the band Red Hot Chilli Peppers, having 3 separate stints with the group, with the first happening from 1988 to 1992, 1998 to 2009, and more recently 2019 until present day. By the late 80s, the Chili Peppers had already gone through several guitarists, including Sherman and Hillel Slovak. Side note guys, I've done a whole story on Slovak's career, the link is down below. Following the death of Slovak in 1988, Frusciante would join the band. His musical background differed greatly from his bandmates, with bassist Flea recalling in the book Fornication the Red Hot Chilli Peppers story. Frusciante was a really talented and knowledgeable musician. He knows all the stuff I don't know. I basically know nothing about music theory, and he's studied it to death, inside and out. He's a very disciplined musician. All he cares about are his guitar and his cigarettes. In 1991, the Chili Peppers would release their 5th and breakthrough album, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic. It would establish the band as one of the biggest groups in the world, but the new success brought challenges, namely insecurity, infighting, and drug addiction. Frontman Anthony Kiedis would write in his 2004 autobiography Scar Tissue about Frusciante's headspace at the time, recalling, "John would say, 'We're too popular. I don't need to be at this level of success. I would just be proud to be playing this music in clubs like you guys were doing 2 years ago.'" It was that attitude that also showed up during the band's live gigs, with drummer Chad Smith telling VH1's Behind the Music, "John was just up there like he didn't give an F about anything, and you can't be in a band and not care, and it's going to show." And it did. A lot of the shows were terrible. Frusciante would stay with the band until May of 1992, before leaving the group following a performance in Tokyo, Japan. He would look back at his time in the band in 1994, revealing, "It was just impossible for me to stay in the band any longer. It had come to the point where even though they wanted me in the band, it felt like I was forced out of the band. Not by any members in particular or management in particular, but just the direction it was going." Upon returning home to California, Frusciante would take up residence in his Hollywood Hills home, finding solace in drugs, art, music, and the thoughts in his head. While to the public he disappeared for nearly half a decade, they would get a glimpse into his mindset at the time with the release of his 1995 solo record, the avant-garde album Neandra Ladesse and Usually Just a T-Shirt. Despite being written 3 years prior towards his tail end with the Chili Peppers, it spelled out Frusciante's fragile state of mind. CMJ and New Music Monthly called it, and I quote, "probably the most effed up album ever released by someone who had once played in stadiums." It was in 1994 that friend Johnny Depp and Gibby Haynes from Butthole Surfers filmed a short documentary with Frusciante in his home that would later be released to promote the guitarist's first solo album. According to Louder Sound, Frusciante would tell a US publication about the record, "My recordings had gone from these happy, optimistic things to celebrations of the surreal to really scattered, demonic-sounding things like the sound of someone whose mind was about to explode." In addition to dealing with severe drug addiction, Frusciante also claimed to have upwards of 400 ghosts in his head, telling Classic Rock, "I wasn't spiritually protected against the spirits that meant me no good. Ghosts that are just there to F with me and drive me crazy. I couldn't discern between them and the ones who were there helping me, and I was so confused. Everything that I was learning seemed to be pulling me towards death. I saw death in everything around me, and everything that was beautiful represented everything that was sad, lost, and gone." Despite being estranged from his former bandmates, he did maintain somewhat of a relationship with Flea, who would visit his old friend from time to time, but as Frusciante's drug abuse escalated, it became too much for Flea. Frusciante would keep himself afloat from royalty payments from his work with the Chili Peppers, but his habits soon started costing him upwards of $500 a day, and he soon was in debt to his dealer, according to Louder Sound. It would be his friends who bailed him out to pay off the debt, but Frusciante would eventually be kicked out of his home, unable to keep up with rent payments, and found himself living at the Hotel Chateau Marmont. The following year, 1997, proved to be Frusciante's worst year of his life. The voices in his head still pushed him towards his addiction, and short on cash, he would release a second solo album, Smile from the Streets You Hold. But by early 1998, things took a turn for the better. The voices in his head started to persuade the guitar to stop using drugs or he would die. He would check himself into rehab and give himself 12 months to see if he felt any better. His old friend Flea would pay him visits during this time and was amazed that the guitarist was trying to turn his life around, and the timing seemed perfect. The Chili Peppers were limping along and soon parted ways with Frusciante's longtime replacement, ex-Jane's Addiction guitarist Dave Navarro, due to both a lack of musical chemistry and the fact that he started abusing drugs again. The move resulted in Flea inviting Frusciante to rejoin the band, despite the fact that his bandmates were skeptical of the idea. But at those first practices, that chemistry that existed 6 years prior was still there. With Kiedis telling Louder Sound, the chemistry was bombastic and beautiful. All that resentment just evaporated instantly. It's like a boyfriend-girlfriend thing. Sometimes you're just effing hurt by somebody that you won't allow yourself to be friends with them. It doesn't mean that deep down you don't love them, but you know, ego, and mind games. Despite rejoining the band, Frusciante still had a long road to recovery from his years of addiction. According to Louder Sound, the guitarist had $70,000 worth of dental work to replace his missing and damaged teeth, in addition to skin grafts to hide the scars of his addiction. His first concert back with the group would happen in Washington, D.C. at the 930 Club, a warm-up gig ahead of an appearance at the Tibetan Freedom Concert. If there was any doubt about the band's future, those would be put to rest with the release of 1999's Californication, the band's triumphant return, and their most commercially successful album to date. Frusciante would end up departing the group again in 2009, but returned most recently in 2019, and played on their most recent release, 2022's Unlimited Love. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. We'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.